I am actually Michael Antonio, and my position. No, okay, I'm not kidding anymore.
Don't think I didn't catch that.
So it's just to see if you're following. No, I am Seralini. I am professor of molecular biology in the University of Caen in Normandy.
Okay. Tell me about what your research has found on GMO.
Well, since 30 years, I have devoted my research to the effects of pollutants on health. And in 1998, the government asked me to be in the commission to assess GMOs. Agricultural GMOs, especially because they were modified to contain high levels of pesticides. Nobody knows that usually, but people don't ask what are these GMOs for. And we discovered that commercially they have been genetically modified in order to be able to absorb the main pesticide of the world, which is Roundup. 80% of agricultural GMOs throughout the world that are cultivated are modified to tolerate Roundup, which is the major pesticide of the world, so that it simplifies the intensive agriculture. This way, you can put as much as Roundup as you want, which is not exactly glyphosate. It does contain glyphosate, but it's not only glyphosate. There are a lot of other hidden poisons in Roundup. So this is why I call it Roundup and not glyphosate. And there are a lot of these poisons that do enter the plants, such as soya, corn, cotton, or oilseed rape. And these four major GMOs, there are only 4 throughout the world, are containing a lot of this pesticide. And there is also a second category of GMOs, like Bt corn, which is modified in order to be able to produce a Bt toxin, which is an insecticide, and at a milligram per kilo in the plant. So we are in fact eating, or our animals are eating, this insecticide with all the secondary effects that we have studied. And today we know that 100% of cultivated GMOs throughout the world are just pesticide plants, full of pesticides. And this is why my research on pesticides and health and GMOs have been combined. And we have made the longest test that have ever been made on pesticides and GMOs, or GMOs, given to animals, to lab animals, in order to see what happens. And we also have studied the effects of the pesticides linked to these GMOs on human cells and on human cases. And so today I've seen most of the files, of the commercial files of the GMO throughout the world. I would like to add that I'm not against genetic engineering. I am a molecular biologist, so I've always practiced molecular modifications in cells in order to understand the role of genes and in order to produce, for instance, proteins in cells. And if you do molecular engineering in the lab in order to understand the role of genes, it's completely different. Or if you produce like medicinal drugs like insulin or growth hormone in the lab, it's completely different than if you modify the plants and put them in the field or in the dish, taking people as guinea pigs. This is completely different at a medical and scientific point of view. So people usually mix GMOs as a whole, and I'm not mixing them. So they are very different categories of GMOs.
Have you found GMOs to be harmful in your studies?
Yes. What we have done is first to isolate the pesticides linked with GMOs. And we have shown that they are toxic for human cells at very low doses, like Roundup or like Bt toxins. And what we have done also was to analyze the files from Monsanto, the files that they have deposited to the governments in order to have the authorizations. And we have seen that they were only for GMOs 3 months long, so not enough. And even there, they studied only 40 rats, for instance, and there were some signs of toxicity in the liver and in the kidney. We went to the court in Germany in order to have their confidential data, and they lost, and we got them, and we published on them. And then we saw that as 3 months was not enough, we asked to the government to make longer tests, and the government didn't want. So we raised some funds by crowdfunding, and we raised 3.2 million euros in order to make the longest tests that have ever been made on GMOs given to lab animals, 200 rats, 100,000 parameters during 2 years. And then we studied what happened. And what we saw was big mammary tumors, and we saw liver diseases, and we saw also kidney diseases. And we published that. And then we went further with Michael Antoniou's group at the transcriptomic and metabolomic level, and we really demonstrated the specificity of what we published back in 2012.
So you're saying the studies by Monsanto and the industry are not long enough to see the possible results from using GMO products?
In general, the studies from industry are really non-scientific and insufficient. There are 2 classes of studies, either for pesticides, and for pesticides they do not do the study on the good products that they are putting on the market. For instance, they are doing the study on glyphosate alone, which is not put on the market as such, and they are not studying Roundup, which is 1,000 times more toxic than glyphosate, together with hidden poisons, petroleum and arsenic. And on GMOs, they are doing only 3 months tests on mammals, which is clearly insufficient in order to see the chronic diseases. So we have seen the chronic diseases, and they are kidney nephropathies, insufficiencies, liver problems that people suffer from, and also big mammary tumors. These tumors have made the turn on Earth, on the planet, in the media, because they were fascinating really to see how much the females can have breast or mammary tumors out of these hormonal disruptors that the pesticides inside the GMOs are.
Now you found, okay, everybody's saying glyphosate's the real bad guy, but you found other toxins in Roundup as well that cause a lot of bad effects, correct?
Yes, we believe that first that glyphosate has to be tested. So what we did in 2005 was to separate the compounds in Roundup, test glyphosate and test Roundup and test the other compounds besides glyphosate, so first to analyze the pesticide. And we saw that Roundup was 1,000 times more toxic than glyphosate, so there was something else. So we analyzed by mass spectrometry what was in Roundup and in other glyphosate-based herbicides, because there are dozens. And we saw that there are petroleum burned residues, oxidated residues of petroleum, like the end of the cuve when there is a distillation. And it's very harmful, like white spirit. White spirit is made out of petroleum. They are detersive products, so they can also be sold by the companies as detergents. That's what they do. Or to extract shale gas, or to go with the pesticides, the claimed pesticides. So they are the formulants, or sometimes they call them the adjuvants. I don't like this term because they don't only help the pesticide, they can replace them. So these products, we have identified them. They are petroleum residues, a lot more collateral, a lot more toxic than glyphosate alone, and they do the job. If you put them alone, they are herbicide. If you put them alone, they are toxic, more than glyphosate. So glyphosate is just like to have the patent easily on Roundup. And of course, it's a little bit toxic by its own, but people, when they found some toxicity, it's because they consider it at very high levels, artificially, because it's not used at these levels in the reality. And this is why Monsanto laugh at it, because they are right to say, but it's too high what you consider. It's not the truth that it makes that in nature. But their Roundup makes a lot of toxic effect in nature, and today we know that in most pesticides it's the same thing. So they declare one so-called active principle. Everybody believes them, from the government, because they have no way to redo the tests. You know, since the Second World War, only the companies do the tests. So they declare, this is a neonicotinoid, this is glyphosate, this is what we use. This is our test on the long term. Everybody believes them, from the government to the NGOs. So it is very surprising that the NGOs, they do not trust Monsanto, but they do trust that glyphosate is the active principle that Monsanto declared. So it's completely contradictory, you know. So we didn't trust anything, and we looked at everything scientifically, and we saw that they are mixing the people with the name of glyphosate and the product of glyphosate. There are a lot of hidden compounds together with it, and that means that we shouldn't talk about glyphosate alone, because it never exists alone, either in the field, it is used with other compounds in the Roundup, or in the regulation. It is tested alone, but it's a false. They are false tests, because they are focusing on only one product in a mixture containing more than 100.
Now, you know Monsanto's going to respond by, oh, we care, so we're going to stop glyphosate, and, you know, and then put something else in. What can you say about whatever else they might put in place of glyphosate and Roundup?
I'm used to Monsanto answers since 2005, because I was in the government committees and I'm publishing on their products. So they don't answer we care, they answer we don't believe it. And I mean, Monsanto's answers are not my problem. Anyway, they replace most of the time one pesticide by another. However, for glyphosate, it's a full other story, because 80% of GMOs have been modified genetically in order to be tolerant to Roundup. They cannot change that in 1 year to dicamba tolerant plants. You know, they tried, they began, but I mean, the whole modified agriculture is based on Roundup tolerance, and this cannot change in 1 year. It will change in 10 years, and in the meanwhile they will lose their market that they have already lost outside America, because you know they came in 1995 in Europe saying, whatever you do in 2000, 50% of all your fields will be our GMOs. And now it's 0.05 in 2018. So they have lost. They have lost in the world, and they are tried to patent all the plants in the world. However, it was not a success. It is really a failure. And this is why everybody knows now. I've been also in the people who have raised a tribunal against Monsanto for their lies. And they have been condemned by the People Tribunal in The Hague in last year. And today we know that whatever they say, people will check regularly what they are doing, and it's not enough. I think that on the long run they have lost.
Why is America not? You're saying, you know, outside America people are wising up. What's wrong with America?
It's an American company, so they have been pushed by the governments from the Vietnam War in order to make the PCBs and the Orange agent. So a lot of American money has been put in this company. So the governments don't want to put, I would say, to put a toxin in their own body. They don't want to have failures in their own economy. So they are kind of linked with the big companies that they have pushed. And this is why they did accept no labeling on GMOs. When you accept things like that, which is unique in North America and in South America in comparison to the rest of the world, then people have no choice. They don't know where it is, and they are just mixed up with what is GMO and what is not, what is a GMO for, and so this is why in America GMOs have been spread, and because people have no choice. But in the rest of the world, in the remaining world, it's really a failure, the economic development of GMOs.
Are you saying that the American government is actively colluding with Monsanto at the expense of its people?
I would say that all the governments of the planet during the Second World War have been committed with big petroleum companies that have made arms and that have made explosives, that have made pesticides, which were the chemical weapons during the war. For instance, the Zyklon B in Germany was made by the government and by the company called IG Farben and then Bayer for Hitler in order to have the gas for the concentration camps. So that was the Zyklon B, and it was used as the first insecticide in Europe. Then there was the most toxic gas ever known in the world, which is gas sarin. It has been made as a pesticide in the 30s during the two world wars in Germany, and then sold to Bashar al-Assad or to Syria, and a lot of migrants have been bombed with this gas recently in 2017. So we know that all these petroleum companies that became chemical companies and medicinal drug companies and pesticide companies have been pushed and financially supported by all the governments of the planet during the Second World War and between the two world wars. And that has made them very rich. And also they don't only make pesticides, they make also the plasticizers like PCBs for Monsanto. And other bisphenol A and phthalates, all that are from petroleum-like pesticides. This is why they are spams of cell-cell communications, and this is why they induce on the long term the chronic diseases such as nervous diseases like autism or others, but also I don't say that all autism come from that, but I say that it promotes these products promote nervous diseases like Alzheimer or Parkinson or autism or the depressions, and also cancers, hormonal diseases, immune diseases, malformations in babies. All these chronic diseases come from the fact that the cell cannot communicate anymore because they are embedded with these pollutants out of petroleum and plastic that are impeding, that are inhibiting their normal communications. And do you know why we can really sit or stand, we can be standing? It's not because we have muscles and bones, not only because if we are died, we have muscles and bones and we don't, and we cannot be standing up. It's because our cells communicate 150 million times more in a more sophisticated way than internet, and they do communicate in order to give their informations in order to make us a full body. This is why we know as soon as we have we hurt or little finger, we know in the millisecond or microsecond that we have that. So these communications are very important. They are electric, nervous system, or chemical, hormonal system, and they are both impacted by these pollutants out of petroleum. Just because petroleum is a fossil product, so it has a long half-life. It is really sticking everywhere in our cells.
So let me see if I can understand. We Americans sloppily use the word toxins to describe certain substances that hurt us, like PCBs and various things. And you're saying that a large part of these toxins are made from petroleum products, and that interferes with the communication in our cells. And if we don't have cellular communication, our systems start dying down and our body can't function well, and it leads to chronic disease.
I'm professor of molecular biology and toxicology in the University of Caen, and I teach to my young students that there are two kinds of toxins, the natural ones and the chemical ones made out of petroleum or plastic, which is also made out of petroleum. So the natural ones are biodegradable quite rapidly. They are venoms. They are the toxins that the natural world makes in order for its own defense against other parts of the ecosystem. And the chemical toxins are more stable. They do bioaccumulate, that's a difference, not like a venom. They do enter the heart of our cells, the nuclei, the DNA, and they are stabilized there by the fact that they resemble petroleum residues. And they have long-term effects. These effects are on the cell-cell communication. They are not specific. They all act on oxidative stress, on mitochondrial cell breathing. They all act on membrane stability. They all act on the synthesis of hormones, the natural synthesis of hormones. They have all these targets. We have measured 5 targets for one pollutant in the cell that I just explained. So we know that they act everywhere like little pieces of sticky sand, everywhere that penetrates our brain or heart or testes or ovaries, or they are everywhere. We can measure them in any gram of living tissue on Earth since the Second World War, because they have been spread by 100 millions of tons, each of them. And you know that we have a continent of plastic close to Hawaii, which is 8 times as big as France. So it's proof that it's everywhere. Every fish in the ocean will eat a little bit of that, and you will eat a little bit of plastic when you eat, in general, things. So we have garbage cleaner genes that all the time try to clean that. I'm studying detoxification. However, if it's everywhere and sticky all the time, most of the chance is that you do bioaccumulate that, and that something in your communication system will go wrong at the time and will promote a chronic disease.
Okay. Now, tell me about fragrances. I understand fragrance in the U.S. is something we don't have to disclose the products, and it's mostly unnamed petroleum products. So women are putting stink on themselves all the time, and is this healthy?
Let's explain how we discovered the role of natural aromas. When we looked at what were the genes impacted by the pollutants, we saw that the breathing of cells was impacted. And the breathing of cells was due to genes that are called cytochrome P450 in particular. There are more than 480 in our organism, and they are also garbage cleaners. They are there to metabolize our internal products in order to wash them out all the time. And they are so numerous, they are 1,000,000 times more tiny than our immune system. They are not devoted to wash out the bacteria or the viruses. They are inside the cells to wash out the metabolites. And they can take in charge the plasticizers or pesticides because they have forms and chemical structures that are close to our natural garbage. And that's what they do. And we have to stimulate them. And we have seen that from the ancient times, natural aromas can stimulate their production. And this is why we amplify in the detoxification cooking, we amplify the natural aromas, but not too much, just to induce the desire, the appetite. And these, when they are 3 by 3, not too much, the not too much is a secret. So it has to be at a physiological level that you appreciate. And then this will stimulate your saliva by reflex. This will stimulate your gastric and hepatic secretions, and this will allow the cleaning of your chemicals inside your cells. And that's what we have seen with rats. I didn't believe it, but we gave these aromas to rats at little doses. If we gave them too much, they try to eliminate the aromas, so then it has the contrary, it has an inhibitory effect. But if we give a little bit so that the rats have the desire to eat something, then they can eliminate the Roundup or bisphenol A or atrazine that we had given to rats in 1 week, and they can recover a normal behavior, because before their livers and kidneys were impacted by these pollutants, and we have given like environmental doses of these pollutants, and they recover normal behavior because we measured the activity of the rats with 3-dimension infrared lasers, and we have seen also at the biochemical levels then in their organs, so that these aromas were able to detoxify, and we published that. So it's not just a theory, that we have practiced what we said on lab animals and also on humans, of course, with medical doctors.
So let me see if I understand. You're saying that to get the gunk out of our body, to get the garbage cleaners, the cytochrome P450 system going, that smelling a slight amount of aromas, but not too much, from natural herbs, etc., can stimulate our garbage cleaner and might be able to get the glyphosate and other uglies out of our system. I also believe that you have mentioned that you can put a little bit of these herbs in our cooking, but don't cook them too much and don't use too much, and this could help our garbage cleaners, the cytochrome P450 system, get some of these awful things out of our body.
Yes. I'm working in food toxicology with a chef also, and he's my co-author, the co-author of my books. So of course he puts a lot of herbs during the cooking, but that doesn't prevent to put 3 little herbs freshly cut on the warm plate, and that will give other aromas than the aromas that you get with the taste in the sauce. That will give an aroma that can stimulate your papillas more rapidly, and that increases your secretions of garbage cleaner enzymes, and this is important. So this system is always working in you. However, you stimulate it a little bit, and that helps in order to detoxify the compounds that you have in you. You know that in Barjac, where his hotel restaurant is and where we make our seminars, in fact, there was the first organic canteen for the kids, for the children in France. And this is how we discovered that we gave the opportunity to the children to grow their herbs in the garden of the school and to put themselves, it was a game, on their plates. So we discovered that they can pee, and this was also confirmed in Norway and in other countries, they can pee more their pollutants if you do like that. So we are not naked in front of pollution, however we can help the garbage cleaner enzymes inside our bodies.
You're saying that it could be whatever local herbs are available. It doesn't have to be curcumin or ginger or basil, but you can alternate these and just take whatever's available locally, fresh, organic, and that will work?
Yes, and they have to be aromatic. You know that we discovered that 400,000 years ago, in the first cooking fires of humankind, there were already some mustard grains. So it has been used then in Ayurvedic medicine in India. Most of medicinal aromatic herbs are active on our digestive system, and they can also, because of their aromatic properties, stimulate our liver and our detoxification system. But we've forgotten that, and we use them in a nonsense way most of the time. Too much, like drinking herb tea all the day long. That's too much, because then our garbage cleaner genes begin to work to eliminate that, to eliminate the aromas that are too much. So you should just stimulate the system in order to eliminate the pollutants, not to inhibit it so that you have to eliminate the aromas, you know. So artificial fragrances, of course, are not good in this way, because your system, you are in fact confounding your system that will not be able anymore to detect a little bit of aromas to detoxify. But it's an ancient capacity that we have to detect the possibilities to detoxify ourselves.
And I understand many of the herbs that one finds in a normal supermarket might be eradicated and it loses these properties?
Yes, it depends on the supermarket. You can grow them at your place, on your pot, on your window. You can grow them in your garden, you can grow them on your balcony. You don't have to buy that. And change them. You have half a dozen of pots and of very well-known aromatic plants that you like. Choose what you like, and you will see you feel better, because then you even eat less if it's well aromatized.
Now, I think you mentioned that GMO might adversely affect the liver. So the liver is where these cytochrome P450 enzymes are. So does this mean GMO, or maybe glyphosate Roundup, can adversely affect this ability to detoxify?
Yes.
Getting the garbage cleaners going.
Exactly. We have identified that all the pollutants and the GMOs are inhibiting the detoxification system. Exactly. And this is because they bring like glue in your system, and your system cannot wash out all the garbage, the chemical garbage that you bring in. That's very simple to understand, in fact. It doesn't bring miracles, but it brings in everyday life a very well behavior, physiological behavior, and it really stimulates the natural detoxification pathway that you have in you since billion years.
So back to the question on fragrances. When you see fragrance in a product, is that I mean, we're assuming it's not natural. What does that do to the body? Is it petroleum-based, once again harming us?
Petroleum is a fossilization of natural fragrances. when petroleum is made under a forest, it's the fossilization during 100 million years of natural fragrances. They are aromatic cycles. When you put that in chemistry or in a motor gas, in a motor, then it explodes and it gives artificial aromas that are broken. And instead of playing its natural role of detoxification, it will stick everywhere and intoxicate you. So artificial fragrances made out of petroleum are full of these broken compounds that are sticky and that inhibit your detoxification system. And also it forces your nose and your limbic system to recognize petroleum as a thing. So it also changes your capacity to feel the pollutants. You know that in my last book in France, we have shown that pesticides were detectable by chefs and winemakers when we put them in water at the level where they are in wine. And we published that also in a scientific paper, and we published a dictionary of the taste of pesticides. But if people are too much sick, they cannot recognize that because it's like a medical drug, flavor. It's too artificial. But if you are used to eat natural products, then you can feel them. And you can feel, for instance, that some of them have artificial strawberry taste, that they are in fact desiccating your mouth and your nose, and you can feel that they are like detergents, like if you eat a little bit of soap each time you eat something which does contain pesticides. And it not only changes the natural taste of wine when the wine is treated by pesticides, but also the natural taste of food that you eat with the wine. And this is why most of the great chefs like Marc Vera or Régis Marcon try to get out of pesticides in the wine, in particular in the food, of course, in order to feel the great taste of food and the natural aromas.
So you're saying fragrances such as beauty products, skin products, cleaning products, as well as PCBs and BPAs, these are kind of petroleum based and they will clog up our system and make it very hard to go toward wellness.
Exactly. All the artificial fragrances made out of petroleum will impact our detection system and our cleaning system inside our cells, and that will intoxify us on the long term.
Can you tell me about the Monsanto papers?
When I was working on Monsanto's products, I was defamed all the time by lobbies, not directly by the company, even if they posted on their websites that our research was not good. But I was not expecting that they say, okay, we'll remove Roundup from the market in one day. But what we saw is a lot of little scientists believed to be the scientific world by most of the agencies, the health agencies. In fact, there were the scientists allowing the products in the health agencies, saying to the health agencies, often anonymously for the public, these products are good, you can put them on the market. And we saw the same animals, the same scientists defaming us in the scientific journals, in the media newspapers, in the radio, in the communication agencies that are devoted to them and to Monsanto and other companies, because 8 companies throughout the world make all the chemicals of the planet, including medical drugs and GMOs and pesticides. So we attacked their lobbies. when they defend our works 7 times, and we won 7 times in Paris, in France. So it's a unique case where an active researcher has been attacking defamatory lobbies and winning 7 times. So some people call me a whistleblower for this reason. I won a prize in Germany, in California for this reason. But I was just doing my job. I was just researching how the pollutants act on health and how we can detoxify that. So then there were some people sick in North America, and some lawyers in California came to me and asked me, is it true that Roundup is making them sick? And so we looked at the files, and I say, these products have been commercialized by Monsanto. So ask to a judge to have the files to show how Monsanto has tested that before putting that on the market, and then you will find why there are problems. That's what they did. And then they won in California, and they got the so-called Monsanto papers, more than 10,000 pages, and there were 18 black files just on my name in them. I didn't realize that, but they had organized all my defamations intentionally with these people called Wallace Ace, the editor-in-chief of the journal who first published my paper, with Richard Goodman, who was from Monsanto and who became suddenly the editor-in-chief of this journal that published me, to say, you have to retract this paper because it's not conclusive. And we saw all these defamation procedures. We saw how much they were paid, one $52,000, the other $100,000, etc. All that is written in the Monsanto papers. And I saw the dishonesty organized at a scientific level. The fact that it was on my name was secondary to me. What was important is that it was made in order to be toxic on public health. Do you imagine the number of children that have been raised by these compounds? My only mistake was to work on the toxicity of these compounds and to understand that. This is why they were under my name. But my name was not really their goal. Their goal was to follow on the commercialization of these toxic products, to say that it was okay, it is well tested, which was a lie. We saw how they were dishonest testing these products, and we were pointing all their holes in the assessment together with the scientists that admitted the products on the market. Because to me, the real criminals are the experts that are assuming that the products are good for the market and saying that to the health agencies. I've been one of these experts working for the health agencies for 12 years. So I know what I'm speaking about because I met these people. I know them by their first name, their last name, and I've seen that they were dishonest. Not always to have money on a short term, but in order to promote their scientific world, their scientific technology in which they have invested or not, and which is the goal of their career, which is their world, their technological world in which they believe. They want to be the kings of the system together with the companies, and the companies work with the universities in order to make some little kings everywhere. So these people are the so-called, between themselves, scientific experts of the companies and of the health agencies. And the governments believe them. So they are asking all the time to the same people, are the product good? And they say yes, at this level, no problem. And such and such researchers that have found some side effects are just not serious. So they are, in fact, how do you say, environmentalists. They want something else, but we are serious, we are science. And in fact, when you look at the files that they have promoted, in order to commercialize bisphenol A, in order to commercialize glyphosate and Roundup, and to commercialize GMOs, you see how they have organized the holes and the lacks in the assessment, and to say that it was well done. And we are today requesting very seriously the full transparency, not on the life of these peoples, we don't care, but on the files that have allowed the authorization of these chemicals. And then all the public, all the medical doctors will understand where are the problems. This is what we began with the Monsanto papers, and we will follow on.
I hope so, because there's a total lack of transparency in the U.S. We can't find out if there's genetically modified food or glyphosate garbage or Roundup in our food, and we need transparency. I mean, you've got to help us, because we're not doing it.
Well, for instance, let's take the case of Roundup, or the main pesticide of the world, which is used with 80% of GMOs, like Roundup Ready soya, which is the major GMO in the world. How have they been tested on health? And where are these tests in order to be authorized? So today we've made many investigations throughout the world. We know that there was only one test for each product made by Monsanto company and given to all the health agencies throughout the world, all the governments. They are secret and confidential. They are supposed to be the secret of making of the company, but that's abnormal because they do include blood analysis for rats, you know. A blood analysis of a rat cannot be a secret of a government. That's it. These products are not tested on humans. This is why there are no clinical trials. They are tested on rats. So on GMOs, on the Roundup Ready soya, most of the time in the years 2000, there was no 3-month test. We imposed 3-month test in Europe. And on Roundup, there are 2 years test, but on glyphosate alone, which is only 40% of the product. So there are no proper tests with blood analysis with the major pollutants of the world, Roundup or Roundup Ready soya. That's a problem, because we tested that and we know that they impact the cell-cell communication system. We understand very well how they work. And the transparency for the medical world, for the people, will help a lot. So I think that we should request to all our politicians, to all our governments, the transparency. If you want a new technology, a new electromagnetic field somewhere, just say, okay, give us the file, the scientific file, where the company tested that on health, any kind of health. If there is a blood analysis of animals, it's submitted to this electromagnetic field, or submitted to this Roundup Ready soya, or submitted to Roundup, or submitted to bisphenol A, or submitted to PCB. Give us a file, what they did to know that it's good.
Aren't some countries like Russia, Peru, banning genetically modified foods?
Yes, there are a lot of countries in the world banning genetically modified food, just because on this basis they requested transparency. I've seen that in Australia. For some, I've seen that in India for the transgenic brinjal or aubergine, or the transgenic mustard. They requested that. We saw the Prime Minister there, and he said, we will request that. And he did, and then the so-called Monsanto Maiko company in India was pushed out of this product, like in Philippines for GM brinjal, etc. Yes, a lot of countries have requested the transparency on the files, and that has pushed away the project and they come back a few years after. For instance, we did that in Canada for the transgenic salmon, and during more than 10 years, the project was delayed.
Okay, now you don't have to answer this, or you can just say, take this off the camera, but has anybody tried to physically hurt you? And if you don't want to go there, we can just turn it off right now.
You imagine that I've been working 30 years on this subject, 30 years of career on pollutants, due mostly to the 8 biggest companies. I have been defamed, and I won 7 court affairs against them. I have been an expert for the government. So they tried everything. First, to make me an expert for them. Because any scientist is approached in the regulatory domain in order to become an expert for the industry, because they are only ones who pay. Their first condition is not to write books, not to write papers without their consent. So it was too late for me. And then they say that I can have trouble. They don't say that directly. They have headhunter cabinets. They go through headhunter cabinets that explain that to you in a friendly manner. That you can be either employed, or you can be a so-called, I explained that in one of my books, project killer. I learned what is a project killer. Do you know? For instance, any big company, like a plane company or Mercedes or any kind of transport company, or even Google or any kind of company or chemical company, buys some project killers, because all the big administrative people having the money, they don't have time and they don't have the competence to understand every technical project. So they say to some scientists, please destroy this project, so we'll see which one will stand up better. And they choose these experts between the regulatory people working in the agencies in order to assess their files. So if the file is commercialized, if the product is commercialized one day, it will go through the same experts. So then you are very honest as a researcher, and you are paid in addition to your salary in order to make a lecture or to make an expertise for these companies in order to destroy their projects. They are not making their project themselves. They have 8 little companies throughout the world that try to sell projects to them in order to develop a new GMO or a new chemical, and they destroy these projects on the paper to see which one is the best. And then they choose this project as a baby. So the experts that have helped to identify the best project, they are there in the commercialization system when they want this product to be their next baby, their next GMO. So this is why the Roundup Ready soya, which is the major GMO of the world, it's stupid, but it is the major plant for animals modified to contain the major pesticide of the world. Okay? So it's a sponge of pesticide. And they say, okay, this is our best project because Roundup is our major pesticide, so this modified plant will be patented and will absorb our major pesticide that will increase its use by 15 in the world, etc. But you don't have to use other pesticides on it. So we will say that it will reduce pesticides because it reduces other pesticides. This is why all the people, and then the communication agencies say that. This is why all the people in the world believe that Roundup Ready soya will reduce pesticides and is an ecological plant. Because they make then the advertisement in a contradictory way of what they want. For instance, they have the so-called counter-positive advertisement. And they can advertise on the fact that it will reduce other pesticides, and then the communication agencies say, remove other. It will reduce pesticide, right? Yes, okay. It will increase our Roundup. Don't say that. It will reduce pesticides, so it's an ecological plant. So the major sponge of pesticide in the world is supposed to be an ecological plant for the government when they develop that. It's kind of stupid when you look at how it functions. However, some project killers have helped from the beginning to the end. They are scientists to commercialize this project and to speak with the communication agencies. If you're not in this system, then they defame you. And they can even use you and defame you. And this is the way they function for any kind of company throughout the world to develop a new technological, a new technique project.
Have they tried to physically hurt you, or do they physically hurt such people who don't go along with them?
Oh, they say that you will have some trouble if you don't follow them too much, or if you criticize them too much, or if you say things that are confidential. And of course, I had some problems in my life.
Do you know if they physically tried to hurt anyone else? I mean, are there people, do you think they'll stoop to the level of hurting people?
Yes, but the they is difficult to know because, you know, for instance, I had problems with former employees of Monsanto who said, I've lost my job because of you. So it's not an homogeneous decision. And this is why it's hard to know.
Monsanto has promised us that, you know, genetically modified products will reduce the need for pesticides and increase the produce of food throughout the world. Has that happened?
Well, we shouldn't forget that GMOs are pesticide plants and that the pesticides inside the plant are never counted. Of course, Roundup Ready GMOs, which are the major ones, 80% of agricultural GMOs, they do increase the level of Roundup like never, by 10 to 15 in the last 10 years. And Roundup is one of the most toxic pesticides in the world, and that has increased. It has reduced some others. However, for the BT plants, for instance, you never count the quantity of insecticidal toxin which is inside the plant, like called BT, and this has increased a lot, so you are eating that. So in fact, these people who say that do not count all the pesticides inside the plant, and of course like Roundup outside the plant. So this is the last goal of intensive agriculture, to increase the pesticide they are selling, to increase the pesticide they are using, and to decrease the others. That's their dream. It's really intensive agriculture. It doesn't decrease pesticide at all. Now, does this increase the food? In fact, hunger in the world increases with the Green Revolution now. So that means that 98% of GMOs have been made to feed the pigs and not the poor children for all the world. The pigs of the rich country, the hens of the rich country, and the cows of the rich countries in order to make them more sick, because we are eating too much animal fat and making suffering the animals also. So all this junk food has been designed for poor animals and to increase the chronic diseases, and not really to increase the good food throughout the world. And more poor people are suffering from hunger with the Green Revolution now.
Any other comments you'd like to make? If you want to comment on what you think Monsanto's ultimate goal might be, other than profit, or any other comments, or otherwise, we're done.
No, I think there will be an issue in the world when we will be out of the big companies. We need companies that are at a human size. And we need to develop detoxifying and natural products. And agroecology has been identified as the solution in order to produce enough food for 12 billion people in the planet.
Okay. I want to thank you for your time, and I want to get you on to your next meeting.